Welcome to Brainish English Stories.
Once upon a time, in a town near the sea, there were two young women. They weren't rich, and they lived in a simple house on the second floor. Their home had a few interesting things from faraway places and some items made by people from India. One autumn day, it was rainy and getting dark. The two women, who were pretty, sat by the warm fireplace. They were feeling very sad because they had just heard that both of their husbands had died. One husband was a sailor and the other worked on land. Terrible things happened to them in Canada and on the stormy ocean. Many people in the town felt very sorry for the women, and they came to visit. Some stayed until it was almost nighttime. They said comforting words from their holy books and wiped away the women's tears. Then they left to go back to their happy homes. The two women wanted to be alone. They felt connected to each other because they had married two brothers, and now those brothers were gone. They sat together and cried quietly. After an hour of crying, one of the sisters, who was calm and gentle, remembered the teachings of their faith about being patient and strong when facing hard times. She decided that they needed to go back to their regular routines. So, she set the table by the fire and made a simple meal. Then, she took her companion's hand. "Come on, dear sister," she said. "You haven't eaten anything today. Please, get up, and let's ask for blessings on the food we have." The other sister-in-law was very upset and had been crying loudly earlier. She didn't want to hear Mary's words now. It felt like a painful touch to her. "I don't think there are any blessings for me anymore." "I don't want to ask for them," Margaret said, crying again. "I wish I never had to eat again." But she felt bad for saying such rebellious things almost as soon as they left her mouth. Mary kept talking to her, and slowly Margaret started to feel a little better. Time passed, and it was time for the sisters to go to bed. The brothers and their wives had gotten married with very little money, so they all lived together in one house. They had equal rights to the living room and two bedrooms nearby. After adding more wood to the fire and putting a lamp on the table, the sisters went to their rooms. The doors to both rooms were open, so they could see into each other's rooms and the beds with their curtains. But the sisters couldn't fall asleep at the same time. Mary, who was dealing with her sadness quietly, soon fell asleep, but Margaret got more and more restless as the night got darker and quieter. She could hear the raindrops falling one after another, and she kept looking into Mary's room and the space in between. The lamp's light made the furniture cast shadows on the wall, making them look like they were standing still, except when the flame flickered. There were two empty armchairs on either side of the fireplace, where the brothers used to sit when they were in charge of the family. Two smaller chairs were nearby, where Mary and Margaret had their special seats, showing the love they had for each other. The cheerful firelight had once filled the room with warmth, just like the dim light from the lamp now. As Margaret was suffering and groaning, she heard someone knocking at the front door. "Yesterday, I would have been so happy to hear that sound," she thought, remembering how anxious she had been waiting for news from her husband. "But I don't care now." I want them to go away, and I won't get up." But even as she decided to be stubborn like a child, she found herself breathing quickly, trying to hear the knocking again. It's hard to believe that someone we thought of as a part of ourselves is gone. The knocking continued, slow and steady, like someone using the soft end of their fist. Words came with the knocking, but they were hard to hear through the thick walls. Margaret looked at her sister's room and saw that she was still fast asleep. Margaret got up, put her foot on the floor, and quickly dressed, feeling a mix of fear and excitement. "Heaven help me," she sighed. "I have nothing left to be afraid of, but I feel more scared than ever." She grabbed the lamp from the fireplace and rushed to the window that looked out onto the street door. The window had hinges, and she opened it slightly to stick her head outside into the damp air. A lantern was lighting up the front of the house, making puddles glow with its light, while everything else was hidden in darkness. As the window made a creaking noise, a man wearing a broad-brimmed hat and a warm coat stepped out from under the shelter of the roof and looked up to see who had answered his knocking. Margaret recognized him as a kind innkeeper from the town. "What can I do for you, Mr. Parker?" the widow asked. "Oh, it's you, Mistress Margaret," replied the innkeeper. "I was worried it might be your sister Mary. I don't like to see a young woman in trouble when I can't offer any comforting words. Please, tell me, what's the news?" Margaret cried out. "Well, an express rider came through town less than half an hour ago," said Goodman Parker, traveling from the eastern region with letters from the governor and council. "He stopped at my place to have a bite to eat and rest. I asked him about the news from the frontiers, the area where that battle you know about happened. He told me we did well in that fight, and that all 13 men who were reported as dead are alive and well, including your husband. He's also been chosen to bring the captured French and Indians back to the province jail. I figured you wouldn't mind being woken up from your sleep, so I came over to tell you. Good night." With that, the kind man left, and his lantern lit up the street, showing blurry shapes and fragments of the world, like order emerging from chaos or memories of the past. But Margaret didn't stay to watch those pretty effects. Joy filled her heart, and she rushed to her sister's bedside with quick, excited steps. However, she stopped at the bedroom door, feeling a twinge of sadness. "Poor Mary," she thought. "Should I wake her and make her sadness worse with my happiness? No, I'll keep this good news to myself until tomorrow." Margaret went to check if Mary was sleeping peacefully. Mary had been hiding her face in the pillow to cry, but now there was a look of calm on her face, as if her heart, like a deep lake, had become still because its sorrows were buried deep down. It's strange that smaller sorrows are the ones that often make up our dreams. Margaret didn't want to wake her sister-in-law, feeling like her own good fortune might make her disloyal and that telling Mary would make her love and trust her less. She turned away with a heavy heart. But joy couldn't be kept down for long, even by the worries that would usually cause great sadness. Margaret's mind was filled with happy thoughts, and eventually, sleep overtook her, turning those thoughts into dreams, more delightful and strange, like frost creating intricate patterns on a window, though it's a cold comparison. In the middle of the night, Mary suddenly woke up with a start. She had been in the middle of a vivid dream, but all she could remember was that it got really exciting just before she woke up. For a while, she was still half asleep and didn't fully realize where she was. She heard some quick and urgent knocking, but at first, she thought it was just a normal sound, like the way she breathed. Then, it seemed like something that didn't concern her. Finally, she realized it was a summons, and she had to answer it. At that moment, the memory of her husband's death came flooding back. She opened her eyes, and the dim light in the room helped her remember everything. There was another quick knock at the street door. Worried that her sister might also be woken up, Mary wrapped herself in a cloak and put on a hood, took the lamp from the fireplace, and hurried to the window. By some chance, the window wasn't locked, and it opened easily when she touched it. "Who's there?" Mary asked, trembling as she looked outside. The storm had passed, and the moon was up. It cast light on the clouds above and on the wet houses below, as well as on puddles of rain that sparkled silver in the breeze. A young man in a sailor's outfit, soaking wet like he'd just come out of the sea, stood alone under the window. Mary remembered him as a sailor who often went on short trips along the coast. Before she got married, he had tried to win her heart but hadn't succeeded. "What are you doing here, Stephen?" she asked. "Mary, don't be sad. I'm here to comfort you," the young man who had been turned down as a lover said. "I got back home not even 10 minutes ago, and the first thing my mom told me was about your husband. So, without saying a word to my mother, I put on my hat and ran out of the house. I couldn't have slept a wink without talking to you, Mary, just like in the old days." "Stephen, I thought better of you," the widow said, tears in her eyes, and she prepared to close the window, not wanting to act like the wife in a story from long ago. "But wait, let me tell you the whole story," said the young sailor. "Yesterday afternoon, we saw a ship coming from Old England. Can you guess who I saw standing on the deck, looking well and strong, just a bit thinner than 5 months ago?" Mary leaned out of the window, unable to speak. "It was your husband," the generous sailor continued. "He and 3 others survived by clinging to a piece of wood when the ship, the Blessing, overturned. With this wind, the ship will make it into the bay by daylight, and you'll see him here tomorrow. That's the good news I bring, Mary. Good night." He rushed away while Mary watched him, still unsure if this was real or a dream. Her belief in the truth of the sailor's words grew stronger as he moved between the shadows of the houses and the moonlit streets. Gradually, a wonderful feeling of certainty filled her heart, gaining strength without a sudden jolt. Her first thought was to wake up her sister-in-law and share the newfound happiness. She opened the bedroom door, which had been closed but not locked during the night, approached the bed, and was about to touch the sleeping woman's shoulder. Then she remembered that Margaret would wake up with thoughts of death and sorrow, and those feelings would be even more painful when contrasted with Mary's own happiness. Mary let the light from the lamp fall on Margaret's sleeping form. Margaret was in a restless sleep, her covers were thrown around, her young face had a rosy tint, and her lips were slightly open in a joyful smile. Even though her eyes were closed, an expression of happiness shone on her whole face. "My dear sister, you'll wake up from that happy dream too soon," Mary thought. Before going back to bed, she placed the lamp on the table and tried to arrange the blankets so that the cool air wouldn't harm the feverish sleeper. But her hand trembled, a tear fell on Margaret's cheek, and she suddenly woke up.